Okay, Dr. Kerr. Um, what I'd like you to talk about, at least first, is kind of the general effects of wildfire smoke on horses. What kind of things can owners do to protect the health of their animals if they're subject to wildfire smoke, which is, becoming more and more common in parts of California?
Well, Phil, I think we first have to say it's not just smoke. It's everything that's burning. That could mean brush, houses, gasoline, tires, rubber. And so all of those components, it's not the flame so much the cell itself, it's the smoke. And so all of those things are inhaled and affect their whole body systemically. If, for example, a horse has been on hot feet, you know what I mean? And feet, oh my gosh, that's a terrible situation. And what I've learned from a personal, from the fire, I think a few years ago, where I actually treated a horse that what had that occur where they're walking on smoke and so on. And I brought the horse to I'm going to say my clinic. Well, it wasn't mine, but and the horse was fine. And I mean, I checked its feet, its lungs, everything. It was fine. And 5 days later, let's say that was a Monday, on Friday, the lady calls me and says, "To Davis, he's horrible." And so he goes to Davis, and they did the same thing. They checked him out in every which way. And then 5 days after that, he went downhill again. And so, and he ended up dying because he found it so bad. He found her laminitis, or found her.
Was this absorbing toxins through his?
Yes, but it goes into their feet. And having hot feet, walking on embers and stuff like that.
And is that worse from radiant heat from horseshoes that will?
No, not horse shot or not shot. It doesn't matter. It messes up. They have waves of systemic or body-wide inflammation in their lungs, in their joints, in their intestines, everywhere, in their feet and limbs, of course. But then, they come in waves. They'll be all right for a while, and then 5 or 6 days later, boom, they're bad again. And this is what we learned from the Australian fires of a few years ago. So my professor, Dr. Jerry Gillespie, told me these things, and we learned a lot of them from the fires in Australia from a few years ago, where they have these waves, recurrent waves of body-wide systemic inflammation in their joints, in their feet, in their lungs, in their intestines, everywhere. And it's just horrible.
And that's for many different toxins?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, when there's a fire like that, there's so many different components burning. There's people's homes, there's rubber, there's gasoline, there's ammunition going off in people's houses. Right. There's just an incredible amount of things that all result in the air and on their feet when they're there. And it just results in this recurring systemic, body-wide systemic inflammatory response. It's horrible.
Well, let me ask you about one in particular, which is poison oak. Because I know that I'm very susceptible personally to the inflammation from that. I suspect that
I am too.
Others are too, but I got it in the hospital with. So what about a horse because the emolument oil is very small?
I don't know that horses in particular are worsened by poison oak. I think just in general, again, the mixture of everything burning.
Yeah, especially with buildings and cars.
Yes.
All sorts of exotic chemicals.
That's the most horrific thing. And I'm going to tell a brief story. My godson, Peter Romulus, he in the 2020 fire in Vacaville, they lived in Vacaville, he barely woke up. The fire came over the mountain so rapidly, he barely woke up and got his mother and his girlfriend and himself out of the house. And all the horses burned as the rest of all the horses. Spider did Paws, which is sort of a famous horse. Burned, and they all burned because they ran uphill. You know what I mean? And so they burned. And I'll tell you that Peter sent me a picture of one that was just horrible, and he asked me what he could do, and I said, "Your chances are slim to none, but put his feet in a low feet up on ice and keep it wet all night." And he said, "Okay." And then when the PG&E guys came, they actually had a veterinarian with them, and when they saw that horse, they looked at Peter and said, "Shoot him, son. He's done." So that's what people do. Anyway, so that's horrific.
So let's back up from a worst case scenario, of course. But what kind of things should an owner be aware of if a fire is approaching? Trying to be proactive to maybe evacuate before you start seeing these effects.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm remembering some of these questions, and the thing about it is nowadays from these fires, there are many people in California, especially in these parts, that they have everything in place. They know they've trailered their horses to fairgrounds. That's what they've done in Santa Rosa, and so there's a pretty darn good system in place. When I saw that particular question, they're on it, and they're savvy people. They're horse people, so they're savvy, and they're on it, and they know that it's a time to evacuate or not, because they got everything ready to go. Probably their house stuff too, if it's their house. So I don't think that's as big a concern, because people are so aware. Again, we're all living with this nowadays.
It's become part of the new reality.
It's become part of the new, unfortunately.